What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast, Jersey Shore edition. Since I am in my remote location at my in-laws' house in the Jersey Shore in Avalon, so I had to move everything down here. I will apologize in advance if the Wi-Fi signal is not the greatest and you see a little delay in the video, but we'll make it work. Lorens, he's a professional, and I'm trying to become one, so we'll see how this goes. As always, I dedicate a show, and today I'm going to dedicate a show to my oldest friend, who's like my sister, Christy Troutman, she's the only other than my mother. There's no one else I've known longer. Growing up, her mom and my mom were best friends, and we lived together a lot during our lives. They're both single moms. My brother Billy and my brother Andy and me and Christy, we were a family growing up, and she lives in the Netherlands now, and she's doing great, amazing things over there in the Netherlands. She's an occupational therapist. She's lived in China. She's lived all over the place, but today is her 51st birthday, and I just want to tell her I love her, and I dedicate this show to her, and for being my best friend for 47 years. The podcast, where can you hear it? You can hear it anywhere that podcasts are found: iTunes, Stitcher, Anchor, you name it, you can find it there. My man, Loren Michaels-Harris, there's not a lot I need to say about him other than the dude is literally one of the most inspiring, uplifting, and powerful men I've ever met. He is the founder of the Power of We Symposium. He is one of the co-founders of the Next Impactor competition. He's a speaker. He's a Goalcast video, millions of views. The dude just does it all. He helps people every day of his life. So without further ado, my man, my friend, Loren Michaels-Harris. How are you, buddy?
Good. How are you? Oh, I was waiting for the 3, 2, 1. Have I been here the whole time?
Oh, we've been here the whole time, buddy.
Me too?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I wasn't like digging in my ears or anything.
No, you are.
Oh, wow.
This is a live show, so we take whatever we get, brother. So you didn't do anything weird. That's good.
Yeah, and that's odd that I didn't. I'm kidding. How are you? You know, I've been waiting to be on this show for a month of Sundays.
Well, I don't ever want to have professional podcasters or guys that are in the industry until I know I got my shit together. So I wanted to make sure that. Well, thank you.
I watch you all the time.
Well, I appreciate that. And your bathroom moments, by the way, people, if you haven't subscribed to Loren's 8 a.m. bathroom moments.
What did you just say?
Bathrobe.
Yeah, trust me, I'm very regular, and that's at 6:15 every morning. The show, however, Bathrobe Moments, is at 8. Yeah, I draw the line at bathroom moments.
So we're not doing a live show from the bathroom?
No, but you know what's funny? I had a guest once who was actually in his bathroom. He thought he had to be interviewed in his bathroom.
Well, I was like, good echo.
I know. I was like, is that a sink? Wait a minute. What are you sitting on? He goes, well, it's closed, but I'm actually on the commode. Aren't I supposed to be in the bathroom? And I was like, no. So anyway, you're not too far off. You're not the first.
Well, I was honored to have been a guest on Bathrobe Moments with Loren Michaels-Harris, and it was a great Facebook Live interview. One of the early ones that I did in 2018 when I started being a guest on podcasts, which was kind of like the precursor to me deciding that I could actually host a podcast. So, it's guys like you, John Vroman, Chris Lockhead, Tony Grebmeyer, Josh Berglund, guys like that gave me a chance to come and be a guest on the show and share my story. And I wanted to make sure before I had you and Josh and Tony and Chris Lockhead and guys like that come on my show, I wanted to make sure that I at least had an idea of what I was doing.
Well, you certainly picked that up like a fish to water.
Well, I do enjoy a story, so.
Don't we all? But I love your show, and I love what you stand for.
Thank you. So you've seen a couple episodes. You understand it's a very simple show. I ask one question, and wherever it goes, it goes. And the question that I ask every single guest is who is whatever their name is. So today I'm going to ask you, who is Tony? Who's Tony? Who is Loren Michaels-Harris? You just had Tony Grebmeyer in my head.
Right. Well, that's a great question, actually. And I don't think I've ever been asked that. And it's amazing because when you were telling me this ahead of time, I was like, well, how do you answer that? And it's interesting for me because I wasn't always Loren. For until I was 11, my name was Larry, and it was Larry Dixon. So I was a totally different person once, and that's kind of where my story. Well, our stories begin at the very beginning, but that's where it really took on a turn, if you will. And I was adopted, which was really not a legal adoption, which I didn't find out until my adoptive mother died suddenly. I looked like this family. I'd only been with them since a few weeks after birth, and had no reason to believe anything other. But when she died, it was I think the same week after we buried her. We buried her on a Wednesday, and then it was that next Monday when the court system knocked on our door. And I'll never forget that moment. Because when after a funeral, before a funeral, when all the family comes in, everybody's everywhere. Every chair, every space is usually occupied by somebody, and everybody's especially Black families. I mean, it's like who can be louder than the next. So you hear all this stuff going on, and there were only 2 times that week that I remember this happening. The first time was when the phone rang after our mom had gone to the hospital 2 days before. I was home with her alone. We had just come from grocery shopping when she had a major stroke and fell on the floor. I was taking groceries in, and it literally tripped over her going back to the car for another bag of groceries. And, so when I waved to her that day, goodbye, she didn't know I was doing it. Of course, she was in the back of the ambulance, which back then looked like a station wagon. They took her away. I stood on our front steps and I waved with our neighbor lady, Mrs. Garner, who came over to stay with me until someone could show up. And I didn't know that she would never come back to that home. Well, fast forward 1 week to the day, there I was again, standing on the stairs. Well, the stairs were involved. I was in the car, a state car, and my family was standing on those stairs. And this time I was waving from the car vehicle that was leaving. And that was me leaving that home and them telling me, this is just red tape and we'll have it figured out and you'll be home in no time. And I aged out of the system. So it was a little bit longer than just a few days. And so my point was, when I switched from Larry to Loren, was just like that. The woman came in. Well, like I was saying, the phone rang when my mom was in the hospital, and everybody was, and the phone rang, and everyone got dead silent. Everyone, all at once. And we all listened to the phone conversation. My sister, okay, thank you, and hanging up the phone and just telling us she just died. And until then, I really didn't realize what it was, and what could be. And then it happened again that Wednesday when the caseworker knocked on the door. And the moment she knocked on the door, everyone did that same thing again. They all got quiet, but nobody looked at me this time. They all looked away. And she walked in and she just basically put it out there. Said her name, Rima Smith. Your mom confided in me. I'm a social worker. She confided in me what really happened with you, and I'm duly sworn by the courts, now that she's gone, to bring this up, and I'm here to take you today. She handed me a trash bag and said I had about 20 minutes because she had 2 more stops, and to pack everything I wanted to take with me. And you can't imagine how it feels to be rooted in a space where no one will look at you and they're the only people you've ever known. You're processing, because she just told me, I know you thought you were adopted. And I was like, no. And then she goes, well, that's what the story was, but you weren't. It was no more than a backdoor deal between 2 African-American women in 1962. And you're not Larry Dixon. Your name is Loren Harris, and you need to come with me. And, as a kid, you're sitting there and you go, what about my bike? What about my dog? What about Cub Scouts? What about everything in my desk at school? What about my best friend, Scott? There were a million whatabouts in about 10 minutes. And so for a long, long time, that's why I love this question, Matt. I've never been asked it. So I'm sitting here processing it truly for the very first time because, that version of me who was Larry, I owe him a undying debt of gratitude for providing the original pair of shoulders that Loren stands on today. And I'm just realizing now that I don't go back and thank him enough. When this career broke for me about 3 years ago, this coming August, I remember it was Steve Olsher. I was on his show and he asked me for some young pictures of me because he wanted to use my story on his stage, in his part of his stage show. And it was then that it dawned on me that I didn't have any. That it was then that it dawned on me that I'd never seen myself younger than probably 9. No pictures. I didn't know I've never seen a baby picture, an infant picture ever. And I started asking people in my adoptive family, and someone found some pictures. I use them in my sizzle reel today. And I use them when I speak at the Power of We Symposium to remind kids that we were all, little ones like you. But it's still, it's odd because, like, say, for instance, this is actually Captain Kangaroo. But if it were me and, and I had those pictures printed and I still pick them up and I look at it, and sometimes I find myself like, really, do you remember the movie with Robin Williams, Hook?
Yeah.
And there's a scene in there when he goes back to visit the Lost Boys, and the one little boy is the one who is just like, I don't buy it. It's not him. It's not Peter. But then he goes up and he pulls away the wrinkles and things, and he goes, there you are, Peter. Like, you're in there. I do that with those pictures sometimes because I look at them and I go, God, you had no idea. You had no idea what was right around that corner known as the future for you. And it's a good thing. God knows what he's doing. It was a good thing that he didn't know. And it's amazing because, one of the things that I'm doing right now is that competition you mentioned earlier, the Next Impactor. And I dealt with that. I healed with that. I healed some of that, there you are, Peter, thing through that competition when I gave the challenge to the competitors, the top 50, to create a video where they wrote a letter to the younger version of themselves. And it's, Matt, that's something I truly would encourage everyone to do. And here's why. A lot of people, like in my coaching, most of the people that come either have or are planning on writing a book. And you'll be surprised, maybe not, but I was, at how many people, you pick up their book and their story starts at, I was 22 years old when, and it's like, life, there was no story before that. And I find that I think that that's something we all need to take a look at, because we cannot cut the tongues out of the earlier versions of ourselves. We owe them much, much more than we could ever truly, fully comprehend. And a lot of people are afraid to go back, which for me, I get it now. When you say, who is Loren? I would not have even a smidgen of an idea if I hadn't utilized the only method of time travel that we as human beings are afforded. And it is called remembering. But see, a lot of people think that remembering means, oh yeah, you had on a yellow dress and you came in that green car with that lady. Okay, I remember. But that's one form of it. But the form that I'm speaking of is, for instance, when this highlighter came from the manufacturing plant, it came like this, in a package with others, but like this, 2 pieces. And if I lose the cap of this highlighter and I come back, which happened yesterday, I left one when I went out of town. I came back today and picked it up. It was dry as a bone, and it reminds me, and I use that analogy in my own world and in my coaching world. The 2 pieces were separated, which rendered one useless, and the other one is useless if this one isn't useless. So the set, you throw them away usually. But sometimes you find them soon enough, and then you remember them when you snap it back together. And when we remember ourselves to as far back as we can go, when I coach with people, because I use the same process with others that God used with me. And I remember the day he told me, go back. You need to go back as far as you can and remember that moment, Loren, when life came to steal its very first kiss from you. the innocent. And that was that day that I just told you about, because those days are days where we awaken one person thinking it's just like every other day, not knowing that we will never wake up that person again. It can be a hard thing. It still is, as you clearly see. It's still a hard thing for me. But the joy, which is within every experience, is also in there with that. Because as I'm, kind of fighting back the waterworks and whatnot, it's not because of a sadness. It's because of, for me, I'm still dealing with how long it took, how many decades it took. And I don't think that what you see here is for me, because my joy is overflowing. But for so many who find it later, maybe never, that's who it's for. When you go back, when God told me to go back to that moment, it was so that I could change that thing on my journey's mantle place, if you will. And you will understand this. That's what I love about your show topic, the title, 2 dates and a dash, because those dates serve as event markers. The dash represents the journey in between, the story. And I had to go back to the date to change the event into experience. And the experience that day was because that was when I was faced with choice, a real choice that would affect me for decades for the very first time. It wasn't like, what do you want for lunch, Larry? Peanut butter and jelly or a chicken pot pie? I had always had those kinds of choices. Do I leave my bike in the driveway or do I put it in the garage like I've been told? But this was a different kind of choice. This was a choice of what replaces. What do you believe or not believe? Who do you trust or not trust? All of the character-based crossroads were instantaneously at my feet. And so back to your original question, who is Loren? Loren is an authority. I am an authority first and foremost for the things that I have lived. Because when I began, that's another beautiful thing about the event, and knowing and realizing how to turn it into an experience. Because I had carried it as an event for many decades, which allowed it to stay how I locked it in, which was I'm cursed, I'm not lovable, and every time another event happened, I dealt with it the same way. 2 weeks after I left that home, my first experience with an abuser took place. So another form of innocence was completely gone forever. You think these things when you keep them as events. It's like if you were in your vehicle and you thought you could drive for the rest of your life and not once look in your rearview mirror. You would have to cover it with something to not be tempted to look in that mirror. And I believe that events are just like those mirrors in the vehicles, which is our body and our soul, for us. Not for us to stare at, because then you would plow down everything in your wake as you drove through life. But they are there to remind us of the importance of glancing back every now and then at where we've already passed in life. And that was a real big thing for me. And it's a big thing when I work with people on getting there and understanding it, because it's very important. Because it wasn't until I went back to the event and converted it into an experience, that's when all the other blessings began. For instance, things like reinventing blame. I'd been going, I hate you, foster system. I hate you, families, both of you. The adopted family for keeping this secret from me, making me believe I was someone who I wasn't, not putting a protection in place in case something happened, and just leaving me to figure it out. I blamed many years until I was 32 when I met my birth mother, for all kinds of things that were just whatever I needed them to be, I guess. And I had to reinvent the abusers, the broken system, which I speak for and advocate for today. kids that are still living in it. I heard from a couple today from my foster care conference a couple weeks ago in Cleveland. They reached out today, and they changed me. Seeing them a couple weeks ago, nothing, first time ever in my life speaking to a room full, hundreds of people, and everybody there had been in the foster system or was in the foster system. It was like looking around at family members that you were meeting for the very first time, and I've already lived that part too when I met my birth family. And so just so many, I'm a culmination of all of the letters, T, E, S, and then T again. Because every testimonial starts with those 4 letters, test. And I am a result of a series of tests, just as we all are. And everything that I used to blame, pointing 3 fingers back at myself, when I was taught through What Is Greater Than Me, the art form of reinventing blame, it began a great process for me. Because today, where a string of abusers told me I would never be in a relationship that worked, I would never be loved, I would never be able to be loved, because that isn't what happened with kids doesn't happen to kids like you. So what I'm giving you is the best it's going to be, so you should learn to love me in return. And I was alone I had one relationship in my 20s, which lasted probably not even 6 months. Until 2 years ago this October when I got married. I dated for a few years, but with my husband. But I really had believed it. But the reinventing started the process that led me to understanding it wasn't about finding that. It's not about us finding Mr. or Mrs. Right. It's about us becoming Mr. or Mrs. Right. And then the rest will come. So, I just... I look over today at all those things, and I blame the foster system, but I blame them for giving me an arm of advocacy. I point and I blame the abusers, but I blame them for giving me patience and keeping me alive as a gay male during decades when people were contracting diseases that took them out of this world and shut down their story before it could even get started good. I thank every experience. I tell people today, and I know they just think, yeah, it sounds good, Loren. But I truly believe, I really mean this. I tell God all the time, for the life I live today, I would gladly live every moment leading up until 3 years ago over 1,000 times for 5 minutes of what I live today. Because I waited so long, I held on so long, listening to something I couldn't understand for many years, but something told me to just keep holding on to it, which was the Creator. I had to go through a lot to get here. And I feel like, what the funny part about it is, Matt, is today I tell the kids, I said, I'm a human scrubbing bubble. If you remember the commercial, they say, scrubbing bubbles, we do the work, so you don't have to. And when I look at the kids, and I have a necklace I wear when I speak to kids that has a series of the same 3 beads on it, square beads, one is smaller and the other 2 are the same. And they represent Aaron, Adam, and Alan, the 3 boys who were in that very first foster home that told me what was going to happen. May not be tonight, new kid, but that mattress over there, some of you have been in my audiences know this story. The mattress that was propped against that wall in that room that they locked us in, and how they told me there was a hole behind that mattress. And it led to a closet in another room that had a hole in its wall and a locked door and a door outside of that door that was locked to get in that room. And that meant that there were 2 keys, but there was one man who held them both. Because you're new, he'll use those keys eventually to come in through both of those doors and crawl through that other hole so he can get through the one that's behind that mattress. He's going to move that mattress, and he's going to come in this room, and he's going to come for you. And those events, now that they're experiences, you don't get it until a kid walks up to you and pulls you to the side with a staff member and says, or I had another one where it was 3 girls. They walked up and the one said, these are my 2 best friends, and they think that for the last 2 years I've been living at my aunt's house, but she's really my foster mother. And I've never been prouder than right now to tell my friends that I'm tired of lying and that I'm a foster kid. And then the other girl who brought the staff member who said, my mom is visiting my granny down south. She won't be back for 2 more days. This was a retreat. And it was the last day of the retreat. And she goes, and my mom's boyfriend told me when he dropped me off on Friday, I can't wait to pick you up on Sunday from here so you and I can have that special time we have before your mom gets back. She goes, and when I heard your story today, I decided I don't want to go back there. And to stand there and hear a kid and see the staff member going, what? And then rushing off to make that call before that boyfriend comes to pick the girl up. And then to hear the things that happen after, you know, those are the moments that you can never plan for. You know, my very first time on stage, Matt, I wish I had the magazine out. You'll see it on my social media. It's on my site and stuff. It's a picture that was in Foster Focus magazine and Adoption Today. There's a woman, a black woman, and she's got one hand over her heart, and my hand is over my heart, and we're holding each other's other hand like this. And that was my night that I got up the Goldcast video night. That was that night. And she was the beginning, even before Goldcast, which was 2 years later. And she said to me, she goes, I want you to know, I wasn't planning on being here tonight. I got a call from a friend of mine who had an extra ticket because her husband got stuck at work, and I needed to get out of the house because I have some real big things on my mind. I was like, well, I'm glad you came. And she said, no, it's more than that. She goes, I have 3 of my own biological children, and we also are fostering 3 siblings. We've had them for a year, and tomorrow that year is up. And they've told us for months now that if we wanted to adopt them, we could. Everyone in my family is on board except for me. And tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, they will be coming to pick these 3 kids up. And tonight when I came here, I came so I could plan on how to deal with my family after these 3 kids were gone, the emptiness, the space, and knowing that I was going to have to deal with a lot of anger from my kids and disappointment from my husband because they want to keep them, but I didn't. And she goes, but I heard your story tonight. And I heard those other women around in this auditorium, because if you listen to the Goldcast, you'll see I lose my place several times. It's because women were literally wailing in the audience. And I don't know to this day, does it mean they gave up a child? They lost a child? They were that child? I don't know. But I do know that there was some guttural, deep, primal pain living within their soul that message tapped into. And she said to me, I want you to know that right now I'm leaving here. And that's when she put her hand there. And I was still just one hand dropped, and she grabbed my hand and she goes, I'm going home, and I'm telling all 6 of my children and my husband that from this day on, until I leave this world, we are a forever family. And I went, and that's when Scott Gay, my photographer, caught the picture. And I do that, you know how I mentioned about looking at little Larry, how I get close and I just look at it sometimes like, there you are. When I look at that picture with that woman, I see God and his purpose. And I look at it and I say, there you are. And it's never a burden. It's never a responsibility. It is a responsibility, but it's not a responsibility that I don't freely accept. It's so interesting how the way pain, I dealt with what I thought was pain for so many, many decades, and I don't cry for myself anymore. it's, I guess what it really boils down to is that thing that I refer to as the universal urgency. You know, I lived in fear for many, 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 many years, for many, 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 many false reasons. But today and I don't really fear it. I look at it and I go, you know what? I got to get her done. I want to make sure that I fulfill my mission. Because every time you do and you check something off or something is checked off for you, because the greatest things are the ones you don't plan for. Those things you don't plan for. Those things that if I believed in words that deceive, I would say something right now like those things that come out of nowhere. You know, those things that make you go, the weirdest thing happened. Oh my God, it was so strange. How? Can you believe? You're so lucky. All of those are words that deceive. Today I am a person who doesn't subscribe to words that deceive. I know that nothing is arbitrary. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is lucky. Those are all words that deceive do is they hop in front of, usually between word number 1 and word number 7 or 8, they'll hop in front of the true message to get us to think that what we've been asking for, longing for, and it finally shows up, just happened to happen. Because it knows that it can convince us to miss the blessing, that thing we've been asking for. There's no way we will get the other part, which is now becoming the blessing. Because you have to see the blessing in order to be the blessing. Because that's what pay it forward. That's what being of service. That's what philanthropy. That's what everything other than yourself is about. You know, you can't do for others what you haven't done for yourself. Not and be authentic. And so today, I'm that guy who this Thursday will turn 57 years old. And I still don't know how to wrap my mind around that because for so many years, I didn't think I was going to be here for the next one. So that means that I arrested my development year after year after year after year because I never looked forward to that next birthday. Or I just didn't believe I'd get there because I had the 3 boys as reference. The 3 A's, I call them, who when I turned 21 and went and sought them out to see where they were and thank them for saving my life, literally. That's when I found out that none of those 3 boys made it out of this foster system alive by 18. They all died before. 15 was the oldest. And so I wear that necklace that I had commissioned. And sometimes I tell the kids or whomever, the audience, about the 3. But most of the time I'll just hold on to it and I'll rub it before I go on. And I you know how like when you see like people that are doing shows and stuff, they get behind stage and they get together in a huddle and pray. Well, we get in a huddle of 4 and we pray. And I thank them for choosing me. And I thank the Creator for choosing me to be that spokesperson because that's how I reinvented Survivor's Guild. So who I am is just a reinvention of a lot of words that deceived for many years. A lot of carelessly, loosely thrown around phrases, which is, I know now, are very dangerous. Very dangerous. That's one of the first things I speak with people about when I either speak with them or I work with them, is about eradicating words that deceive. And today I am a person who begins and ends my day with gratitude for everything. I count it all joy. I do. I count it all joy. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen my wall, but one of the things I love about the me of today is it feels so perfect, you know. our imperfections are what make us perfect. And every time I looked at one of those and really looked at it, I found that it wasn't imperfection. It was a penny. It was a value. It was something that I could identify and say, wait a minute, if that's not what I want, then why is it still here? Do something about it. Because there are only two choices. There's always only been two choices for Larry, Loren, and everything in between. And that was the choice that I made, or the one that I didn't. And I used to beat myself up about not being so organized, being messy. Because I remember my adoptive mom used to, get in there, Larry, and clean up your room. And I'd say, just let me shut the door. And she'd say, no, go in there and clean it up. I said, but you won't have to see it. And I'd say, why is it so important? I'd be mad in there, throwing stuff around. And she'd open up the door and she goes, I don't care about you getting mad. She goes, you're going to clean this room up because what you see around you is an indicator of what's going on inside you. And when it's messy out here, it's bound to wind up messy in there. I'll clean it up. And so I'm getting somewhere with this. I used to really like what I'm looking at on my workspace. Look, I'll show you. See down here, you see all this stuff all stacked up, just like everywhere. And it's that way. I have files and stuff all over the floor, all kinds of stuff. But that's my stuff, okay? That's the stuff that I do that, bucket list and, And the thing is, I used to be the kind of person, like you have one of these, right? A legal pad, and I flip them over and files get on top of each other and things get stuffed and stuff. That's stuff that's just me. But when I began that start and end my day with gratitude, that's how Bathrobe Moments was born, because I kept saying I don't have what a lot of these people have. I know you, when you said you just started, I remember that moment for me. And I was like, I don't have a green screen. I don't have a fancy microphone. And God told me, you have everything you need right now. You could sit down right now and change the world. And I was like, how? I'm in my bathrobe with a coffee cup and my phone. And he says, go live and call it Bathrobe Moments. And I sat down and I did. And Bathrobe Moments has been a door of opportunity for myself and for bringing wonderful people into my life and touching people and being touched by people, and just a wonderful two-way feed that was missing in my life, because I was always the kind of person to wait until I had what I thought it took, when really, because of the art of remembering, that I know now, I came to this world with everything I needed to make it through any and everything. But I had to remember myself to that knowingness. I tell people that I work with, we're told, we put so much stock in, what the odds of you doing that is, or the odds of becoming this, or the odds of, once we make it to the egg first, those are the greatest odds to beat ever. There are more zeros behind that number than any other odds that I've ever seen. And once you make it to that egg first, it's not about beating odds any longer. It's about, after you draw that first breath of life, now creating the odds to keep changing this world in a big way. So back to, who is Loren? Loren is that culmination, of all those different experiences. All those different experiences. And I'm going to tell you something, and the difference between that stuff there, that is just me doing stuff, is this wall right here, where you see all those Postit Notes. Do you know what those are? And I put this out there because I tell people this all the time. They go, oh, you're getting like all these shows and, television and MTV's coming to your event and they make a big deal. Or you're on the cover of this, or you're doing that. And how do you do it? And I say, I don't. It's a result of allowing things that are pushed over to me to find their way through me. And every one of those Postit Notes up there represents something that came through me. Wasn't my idea. A lot of them are out of context. Sometimes there are some up there that have been there for a year and a half, 2 years. And there are some that come off almost weekly that have been there that long. But I'll be sitting, because I don't believe, like when I'm writing or coming up with content, I don't sit there and try to come up with an article. And I write for Global Achievers magazine out of Australia, and I write monthly for Money Inc. And I don't ever have to sit down and, oh boy, I got to write that article. Because I know how long in my life I long to be heard. How can I bitch about it now? Like, oh, I got to write that damn article. Oh, I got to do a post. No. I'm like, oh, you know. And so when you allow things to come through you as opposed to feeling they have to come from you, it takes a lot of the pressure off, hands off the wheel. You really get an idea of where you fit into the scheme of things, and it removes so much undue pressure, because it's not about me. It's 80% about them and only 20% about me. And it's not the events that make up the 20% that I give. It is about the journey. It's that story. Matt, I'll tell you, I don't know, whoever is listening, it doesn't matter if you're a creationist. It doesn't matter if you are an evolutionist. Both of those stories begin with the absence of light. The Big Bang, it was dark. And then boom, there was light. If you're a creationist, there was darkness on the face of the earth. And then he said, let there be light. One story starts with in the beginning, and the other side of the aisle starts with once upon a time. But they all go back to that event so that you can begin the journey. 2 dates and a dash. And when I decided that I didn't even know I had words to make a line, to create a paragraph, to do a page, to work towards a chapter of a story in my life, let alone a classic. But neither did Mother Teresa when she first knelt down on the streets of Calcutta. Neither did Martin Luther King when he saw an injustice being done in his hometown as a child. Medgar Evers, the list goes on and on. Any legend, every legend that's ever lived a legendary life in our world, all of them were once a nobody, and all of them, just like every expert, were once a beginner. And that's how the story begins for all of us. The only difference between them and you and I is what we do with our 24 hours and that choice we made as opposed to the one we didn't. And I'm grateful that only 20% of it is about me, because I wouldn't want 21. I mean, I would live it all over the 20. Like I said, I'd live it all over for 5 minutes of now, but doesn't mean I want 21% or 40%. If 20 is what it took to be able to get to the 80, I love those odds. I love those odds. And I say that because I want to encourage people to know that it all will make sense. The moment you remember yourself to why you are here and understand that everything you've ever needed has been with you, that wherever you are right now and whatever you're dealing with right now, if you only believe for a nanosecond that everything you've ever lived, you bring it to here, to the now. You acknowledge everything that you're living within right here in the now. And you look to the right towards everything you could ever hope to become. And you bring those dreams to the here and the now. This is when it all becomes clearer. This is when it begins to make sense. It's where it all begins to come together. So that you can use your voice of authority to write a classic, not a dime store novel. And a dime store novel is the equivalent, in my opinion, of a version. An aversion means that you picked and you chose what to keep and what to throw, what to hold and what to fold. But the moment you bend the truth, it is no longer the truth. There is no such thing as a little white lie, and you cannot lie by omission. You just lie. You lied before you scratched it out, before you bleeped it out, before you hid it under a bushel. No, you chose. But the moment you say, There's a reason when we go to court, we say the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. So now I changed it around and I started, so help me God, find the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that was the beginning of a great, great day, because I found that the truth is the only thing in this universe, Matt, that never changes. And it will never change on us. It doesn't get older. It doesn't rust. It doesn't go out of style. Doesn't get thinner. It doesn't get heavier. If you tell me the truth right now and we reconvene 300 years from now, you don't have to remember what you told me today because it hasn't changed. It's still the truth. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But the beautiful thing about it is, again, like the rearview mirror, you don't have to stare in it. You just look your truths directly in the eye with your soul, with your spirit, and you wave your hand of purpose towards every door of opportunity, and you say to them, after you. Just like Dorothy did on The Wizard of Oz when she landed from black and white turbulent world, and she got up and she went through the rubble, and she saw that door. But she didn't just open it, rush in, and slam it behind her and leave us over there. She opened it, she took a quick little peek, and then she got behind the door and she opened it out as if to say, after you. And the camera moved in, and the birds chirped, and the harp started playing, and there was Oz waiting right there. She took us through that door with her. And our truths will do that, because when we do that, when we say after you, now the Creator walks before you, the Creator stands beside you, and the Creator walks behind you, so you don't have to worry about those blind spots that intimidated and broadcasted tragedy after tragedy for as long as we allowed them to. He'll let you know, don't turn around. There's nothing here to fear. Just keep moving. Hence, keep your eye on the prize. So it all comes together. All the cliches, if it's Aesop's fable, American folklore, slave stories, Confucius says, everything in this world that has a moral to it is there so that we can find our way. If you're a Christian, it says, don't be lukewarm, be hot or cold. If you're reading a farmer's almanac, you may see in there, don't put one foot on both sides of the fence, you're going to piss down the middle. They're all saying the same thing. We all have the same chance, the same opportunity, the same responsibility to understand why we lived what we did, why when we went into the tunnel, we went in with a G and O. When you come out the other side, in your other hand, you have the R and the W, because the go now becomes grow. When you go in, you come out, now you know something. Now you have to show through universal urgency, that law of attraction, to show others, to be of service. So you go, you grow, now you know, now you show. Keep doing that routine. That's the circle of life. That's it. The metronome is on the top, going like this to set the pace. Just choose what kind of dance you came to in this world. What's the tempo? So you know if you're becoming complacent or if you're moving too fast. If your tempo's this and you're go with the metronome. It's up here. And then the other half of the circle of life is the pendulum. Both of these things are creating momentum. The metronome is for pacing. The pendulum is a time reminder. None of us is going to ever beat this one. He has beaten every every runner in this race. Everyone. So we're not in, you and I and Oprah and Mahatma Gandhi and all, none of us are in competition with each other. We're only in competition with the pendulum of time. Because he's the only one that every one of us will lose to. That's it. That's it. So, when you do this and you keep on point, get up, get it done. Don't sit there. Don't hide. Don't bury your head in the sand. Get up anyway. Don't listen to that broadcaster. Turn him into a narrator. I had a broadcaster telling my story. No, I turned that box completely off and turned on the narrator who was writing my story. Big difference. There's a difference between running from something as opposed to running towards something. When I was running from my truths, I ended up in that same underground parking structure. The getaway car was all the way at the end, one little lonely, hangling, dangling light bulb. And every time I ran, But the car got further away. And I was running because it wasn't like I was running to the car. I was running from the second set of footfalls I thought I kept hearing echoing in there with me. Until one day, the day that I told you about, when God worked with me, he said, now what is your rock bottom? You throw that around. I guess I haven't hit rock bottom. That's a loosely used term. Put a face on it, Loren. And I said, well, I'm always down in this it's like I'm in an underground parking structure and I want to get out, and I'm scared because every time I take a step, I hear another step right behind me. Because I didn't know he was behind me. And it wasn't him. He said, here, I'm behind you. I don't see anything. I'm beside you. I still don't see anything. And I'm down there where you're trying to go. And trust me, there's nothing down here. So what are you doing? What do you have within your power that could control and change this situation that you've been dealing with time after time after time for 50 years? I said, well, he goes, how many footfalls do you hear? I said, 2. How many pairs of feet do you have? I said, 1. So that leaves 1 other. I said, yeah. He says, have you ever considered before you take 1 step, maybe try taking off your shoes? And I was like, wait a minute. Because if something really is following you, chasing you, you'll only hear 1 set now. And I tried it. And there was nothing. I said, maybe I need to run a little bit. That's when it'll kick in. I know it's in here. Nothing. So all of a sudden, now I'm like, hey, the difference of running like this towards something, now the car's getting closer to me because that's destiny, that's purpose, as opposed to this. Looking behind, there's a huge difference, and the car kept getting further away. It was when I took those shoes off and heard that there was nothing chasing me. That's when I stopped running from, and I started running towards the arms. It wasn't a car at the end. It was a set of arms saying, here you go. Come on in. That would have been 3 years ago, this August. And again, I promise you with everything within me, I put it on every person who I feel I owe so much for playing specific roles in my life. All 22 mothers, all the countless kids whose heads laid on countless beds in that foster system, those who made it out and those who didn't. When you get to that place where it comes together, I guarantee you, you'll marvel at what you were chosen to do in this world. If something greater than me would have told me what today would mean for me way back at the beginning, that first date, and a lot of the dates along, and until I learned, before I was ready to learn about the dash, it literally most likely would have scared me to death. So everything happens in its time. Everything in this universe has a number and it has a place. There are no accidents. There are no mistakes. There are merely victories in the making. And the results of the decision you made and the results of the decision you did not make. That's it. But we make it so much more difficult. Trust me, 50 years worth of practice on that one. But that's it. That's who I am. And I love that you asked me that, and I was able. This is very healing for me, Matt, because sometimes
I went to church. So
you're funny. Well, you know, it reminds me, and we all need that, and I thank you for this. It reminds me to never forget who I am, because no matter what happens up on the walls and on the social media and on the screens and stuff, it's not about what you have. It's about who you are and how you got there.
Well, brother, I'm telling you what, it was an amazing hour. It's the least talking I've ever done in a show, and I'm thankful for it. It was there wasn't a moment in there where I wasn't captivated by what you were saying, and I appreciate you being vulnerable. I appreciate you sharing the tough parts. Each of us that are aware of our journey and where we've been and how we got to where we are. There's those moments where you feel as if it's too tough to bear sometimes, but it's when you actually take a chance to go back and relive your life and accept and acknowledge the moments that you lived as part of the journey that got you to where you are today 50 years later.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful part. That's when you were talking about that joy.
Yeah.
Having that exact same thing, completely different circumstances, but having gone back and had to go back and relive my life and acknowledge things that happened in my life is when my world opened up to me. And that healing process, that grace from God, that moment of clarity is what sets me apart from other people who haven't gone there yet.
Yeah.
And you from other people. And that's where, with what we're doing individually in our collective platforms, is we're trying to open up people's possibilities for who they can be once they first acknowledge who they have been.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
And I appreciate you for sharing that. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to close out the show.
Okay.
We're going to talk offline. But thank you very much for listening to another episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Thank you again to my very special guest, Loren Michaels-Harris, for his vulnerability, for his honesty, for his ability to share something very deep and personal that I'm sure will resonate with many of you. I thank you. And everyone, please go out and be kind to one another. Live a life of purpose and intention. And just know that where you've been has a lot to do with where you are. And if you go back and relive that and acknowledge it, you'll find out exactly how you got there and where you're going. All right, everybody, God bless and be kind to one another.